thought he had found the perfect match.
If he knew he was right and felt in his heart he was right, he was right.
They were definitely in love. He was happy.
But a violent crime turned their world upside down.
He was riddled with bullets.
16 shots was overkill.
That they could just snatch a life. It's not fair.
Was it the consequence of a community plagued by violence?
The city definitely sees a lot of shootings.
The gun violence is completely out of control.
Or was the crime rooted in a bitter betrayal?
They described a very, very violent relationship.
If you're in that situation, this is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.
It was like Mark Hughes in the 80s. The boy was breathing his last breath.
July 27, 2019. It's a muggy summer night in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a city of 150,000, an hour outside of Manhattan.
Bridgeport is the largest city in Connecticut. Most of the people are probably below poverty level.
The trip gets a bad rap because in some neighborhoods it is a large crime area.
Crime has increased so much that the city has installed a state-of-the-art system to alert police to possible gunfire.
It's an automated system where there's microphones and it detects the sounds of gunshots. So they're generally placed in high crime areas.
Bridgeport has started using that more in the last couple of years, since they weren't always getting calls to 911 when there were shootings.
And at 1 a.m. that Saturday, the system alerts police to 16 possible gunshots on a street corner in Bridgeport's East End.
Anytime there's a lot of shots fired like that, the police will go and respond.
And when the police arrived, they found a man shot on the corner.
34 Alpha, I've got one male down here in the parking lot.
He had clearly suffered multiple gunshot wounds, and he was lying on the ground in a pool of blood.
Do you all know him?
Yeah, that's my friend, Dathan.
Dathan, can you hear me?
One of the bystanders identifies him as 32-year-old Dathan Gray.
Dathan.
Dathan Day Gray was always known to be larger than life.
When he was born, my father said I need to get him a twin bed instead of the bed for the baby because he was so big.
He was like a gentle giant. Even something as simple as an argument over basketball, he could de-escalate the situation, bring it all back to a calm.
Dathan used his love for sports to put his outgoing nature on full display, and even coached a group of neighborhood kids.
He loved to play basketball since he was a little boy.
You could always find him on the court.
He was very passionate about coaching. He felt that it was a means to bring people together.
That was his thing. He liked to teach the kids and everything.
Although Dathan was known to be a bit of a ladies' man, he began to long for someone to settle down with as he reached his 30s.
To be totally honest, I just never seen him as like the Dayton type because he was just always headstrong. But if I could tell the truth, he definitely fell in love easily.
And when Dathan connected with a woman from the neighborhood named Larice King in the spring of 2017, he fell head over heels.
She was from the side of town we were from. You know, she was popular.
She was well-liked, had a lot of friends herself.
She got a funny laugh. Like, she's down to earth. She was kind of just like him. Instead of opposites attracted, I was two of the same kind of people attracted.
Everyone around him knew that he was really, really in love with this woman.
When it came to sealing the deal with Larice, Dathan didn't want to waste any time.
He said to me, "Ma, I'm gonna marry Reese." So then we have the wedding.
The day of the wedding, I knew, like, all right, he's really in love.
A few months down the line, they had their own apartment they were doing well.
It was solid. I know that it was good.
Unfortunately, though, the couple's wedded bliss would be short-lived.
After a year of marriage, they hit a rocky road.
The relationship was unhealthy and toxic. Their personalities just didn't vibe with one another.
I think most of the time, when they were good, but she would be disrespectful. She had to let everybody know that she was the boss.
You know what? You can't do anything right. You are so worthless to me.
Yo, why you always coming down on me like this?
I'm like, all right, so maybe it's just like a little lover's quarrel. You know, y'all newlyweds, y'all still trying to figure each other out.
Every day I text him and try to encourage him to keep his head up because he really wanted to save his marriage.
You never do anything I ask. You don't cook. You don't clean. Right. You're lazy. You don't do anything.
Reese, can you calm down, please?
You know what? I'm done. I can't deal with you anymore.
To Dathan's dismay, Larice didn't feel the same.
They eventually separated. They both decided to move on. What ends up happening is that the relationships become so toxic that both of the people start to break down. And there's nothing left to the relationship.
Once that split happens, he doesn't sit and stagnate. He's not gonna sit around and woe is me. No, when he moves, he moves.
In early 2019, Dathan fell for 25-year-old Crystal Blair.
This relationship was different than his ex-wife. It was calm.
The girl was actually pretty cool. It was all cool. Everything was all good.
Before long, Dathan began thinking about settling down with Crystal.
He got a job at the local convenience store right across the street from his apartment, and he started taking classes at the local community college.
What's going on? Just case, please. All right.
He said, Ma, I can't work these little jobs like this. I gotta get me an education.
You have a good one, 17.
That's what he was doing. He wanted to do social work.
He just loved people and he really wanted to make a difference.
But those dreams are suddenly in doubt when police find Dathan lying in a pool of blood on a street corner near his apartment.
Dathan had been shot more than a dozen times.
I've got a pulse, but it's weak.
This area had seen a lot of crime and gunfire before, so it wasn't uncommon for police to be called.
And when detectives arrive, one of the bystanders will give them their first lead.
The neighbor let police know that Dathan had been in an argument.
They seem to be really getting into it.
He said that Dathan had been fighting with his girlfriend, Crystal.
After a tough separation from his wife, Larice King, life was looking up for 32-year-old Dathan Day Gray.
He had a new job, he was going back to school, and he had a new girlfriend.
That girlfriend was 25-year-old Crystal Blair.
Day-Day's family and friends could tell that he was in love.
Crystal happened to be very different from Larice, something that he really appreciated and grew to love himself.
But on July 27, 2019, Dathan has been shot multiple times on a street corner between his apartment building and the convenience store where he works.
This is a tragedy. Dathan was someone's son. He was someone's brother. He didn't deserve this.
While paramedics rushed Dathan to the hospital, detectives began trying to make sense of the crime.
The sidewalk and street were littered with shell casings.
There were 16 9mm shell casings, which exactly corresponded with the 16 shots heard.
The sheer number of shots leads detectives to believe this was more than just a random robbery.
It's just not common for someone to unload a gun when they're trying to rob them. There had to be some rage and purpose here.
But who would want to target Dathan Gray?
Can you tell us what happened?
Detectives turned to the onlookers, drawn outside by the shots and sirens.
All of the people there said they did hear the shots, but at the time of the shooting, they ducked for cover. And when they came back up, they all noticed that Dathan was lying on the ground shot.
No one had actually seen who had fired that gun.
However, witnesses say that they had seen Dathan's girlfriend, Crystal Blair, only moments before the gunshots began.
Neighbors at the scene told detectives that Day Day was arguing with his girlfriend.
They seem to be really like getting into it.
While police put out an APB for Crystal, detectives receive unfortunate news from the hospital.
He didn't make it.
Dathan's devastated family is there by his side.
I'm at the hospital and everybody is crazy. Everybody's all over, and I'm still like, he didn't make it. Not registering here.
They pronounced him dead. And I'm literally just walked out of a hospital room.
Investigators are now more determined than ever to find out what happened to Dathan. And their first step is speaking with Crystal Blair.
Police were able to track down Crystal at her home, which was about a mile away. They were able to take her into custody, and they asked for a statement, and she agreed to it.
Crystal was very shaken up, very disturbed, very upset about what occurred.
We have witnesses who can put you at the scene having a heated discussion. Does that sound right?
It's not like that. Yes, I was mad, but Day was just acting up again.
She admitted that she had been hanging out with Dathan moments before the shooting.
She said she was arguing with him because she was upset because he had been drinking and eventually ended up getting drunk.
Which was a problem because Dathan was supposed to work that night.
You're gonna lose your job.
I didn't even have that much to drink. Like, calm down.
Crystal said she was just trying to help him.
But Crystal claims they were both taken aback when a couple of strangers approached.
Crystal says in the midst of her arguing with Dathan, two men walk up and approach Dathan on the sidewalk.
They were both wearing gray hoodies.
When the men approached them, one of them shoved her away.
You know what I'm saying? Everything's like, hey!
And that's when she heard the shots.
Dathan Gray's girlfriend, Crystal Blair, claims to have witnessed the shooting that left the 32-year-old dead on a street corner in Bridgeport's East End.
Crystal stated while she was arguing with Day Day, two men approached.
They were kind of bundled up in hoodies. Their hoods were up.
In the middle of the summer, most people don't have hoodies on, and even if they have it on, it's not tightly drawn around their face.
Crystal tells detectives that as the men drew nearer, one of them shoved her away.
And that's when she heard gunshots, and she started to run.
She ran around the corner, and she eventually heard the shooting stop.
I didn't know what to do. I was scared, so I just ran home and barricaded myself inside.
Did you get a good look at either of them?
No.
She stated she could not see their faces.
They had their hoods pulled up real tight.
The only thing that she can really give them is that they were both black males, one tall and one short.
To detectives, Crystal's story isn't quite adding up.
But you were fighting with him right before he got shot. Now you have to understand how that looks to us.
I would never hurt Day. I loved him.
Yeah, but you were there when he got shot, correct?
Yes, it was horrible. It was horrible.
Crystal's lack of details raises a red flag. There's also the fact that she didn't return to the scene after the shooting stopped.
People came out of their houses to see what had happened, but Crystal went home after she fled.
Why didn't she come back to check on her boyfriend?
The circumstances seem eerily convenient to police.
The fact that she ran and never returned to the crime scene made the police think that she had plenty of time to hide the gun, go home, change her clothes. It really left the police with a lot of questions.
But with no solid evidence against Crystal, police must release her for the time being.
You're free to go.
In the meantime, they work on verifying her story using the same ShotSpotter system that originally alerted them to the crime.
They have sensors and cameras that are kind of placed throughout the city.
There's a network of security cameras that are mounted to utility poles.
When detectives checked the camera near the block where Dathan was shot, they immediately hit pay dirt.
It does show Dathan and Crystal in the street talking or possibly arguing.
They see him and her going back and forth.
And at 1:13 a.m., two men entered the frame.
Just as Crystal had described, two men wearing hoodies stepped from in between the parked cars. The man wearing the dark hoodie pulls out a gun and opens fire.
They clearly want to make sure he was dead because these were close range. These were not from a distance.
This was a significant development in the investigation. Detectives now had everything caught on video from start to finish.
They could see that Crystal was telling the truth.
No, they had their hoods pulled up real tight.
Now the police are left to wonder, who are these two men?
Unfortunately, the video quality was so low, the police couldn't make an ID.
The footage does strengthen investigators' suspicion that this was a targeted hit.
They weren't just randomly shooting. They specifically pushed his girlfriend out of the way to get him and surround him to shoot those 16 times.
It was almost as if the killers were trying to send some sort of message.
More than likely, 2 or 3 shots, he was dead. 16 shots was overkill.
Considering the brutality of this crime, it isn't just the police who are looking for answers.
It is definitely a shocking case, I think, just for the community, for everyone hearing about it. I think anytime we see a lot of shots fired like that, it's definitely something that kind of gets more attention.
Especially in a city that's already struggling with gun violence.
The gun violence, to me, is completely out of control.
But what made these killers so angry? And who are they? Detectives will soon get the answers they've been searching for when one of the witnesses from the scene, Natalie Wallace, contacts them.
Homicide.
According to Natalie, she knows who was behind it.
Daddy!
Homicide.
Detectives in Bridgeport, Connecticut have reached a standstill in their investigation of the shooting death of 32-year-old Dathan Day Gray. But all that is about to change.
The day after the shooting, a woman by the name of Natalie Wallace contacts detectives.
Natalie was one of the witnesses at the crime scene who police initially spoke to. But she says she has new information for them that she was afraid to share until now.
Natalie was an old friend of Dathan's, and she was out that night and actually had seen the entire thing.
According to Natalie, she knows who's behind it all.
When Natalie sits down with detectives, she begins by explaining why she was in the area that night.
Natalie says she was going to a party around the corner from the snack shack. She knew that Day worked there.
She stopped at the snack shack to get something to drink.
No. When I pulled up, there was a commotion going on. You could hear it all the way up the snack shop.
She said she found Day in a heated argument with the woman who actually owns the snack shack.
According to Natalie, Dathan had been drinking and his boss is angry with him.
Have you been drinking?
I mean, that don't matter. I gotta get to work.
No.
Dathan did have one too many drinks that night, but he still was willing to work and didn't want to miss his shift.
Dathan does this anytime he works. Everybody knows that. He stands outside, he drinks. This is regular Dathan. This is like nothing new.
Natalie says she stepped in and tried to reason with her friend.
Day, come on. Not this again. You ain't gotta be here. I'm so sorry. I'll get him home, okay? I'm sorry. Come on, man. It ain't worth it.
I was like, Dathan, you don't gotta be here. Like, let's go. You ain't gotta be in your argument.
She said she eventually led Day home.
We need to go.
Finally got that situation calmed down. Once that passed, I said, okay, Dathan, going down here, meet my aunt.
She heads to the party, and Day Day goes to his apartment, which is right across the street.
Natalie explains when she walked outside the party an hour later, she saw Dathan standing in front of his apartment.
Natalie says she steps outside, and Day Day is in another argument.
Really? Really? You got people calling me at my job? Telling me that you're drunk?
calling you, man.
You can hear the commotion. I didn't realize it was Day-Day until I seen him running around the car. And then when I looked up, it was Reese.
Reese is Dathan's estranged wife, Larice King.
So now I'm trying to figure out how Reese get here. You know what I'm saying? You don't see her car. You don't see nothing. How did you get here?
Apparently, the owner of the snack shack called Dathan's estranged wife, Larice, and asked her to come over there to deal with Day-Day. So Larice shows up with her friend, Jessica Adams.
They've been fighting him for months.
Okay.
Larice was all in Dathan's face, calling him a coward, trying to really get him angry and to fight.
Yo, what is she doing here?
What is wrong with you?
Yo, mind your business and get back in the car.
Get back in the car. What is wrong with you? Why would you do something like that?
Natalie says she goes over there to try to defuse the fight.
Coward?
Why you bring her over here?
I grabbed him immediately. They didn't know. We're not doing this.
Huh? And then she have to clean up your stuff?
Day-Day, look at me. She isn't worth it, okay?
Keep out my business.
Natalie says she ignored Larice and tried to get Dathan to do the same.
And I'm just like, Daddy, just calm down. No fight.
But Larice wasn't having it.
Larice comes over Natalie and punches Dathan in his face.
I'm in the middle. Going at it.
It turns into a big brawl.
So now we see here, Day-Day again, boom.
Again, she steps in and eventually gets them separated.
Get out of
Back
here,
off. No, let's just go. Let's just go.
I'm trying to tell Day-Day, like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to keep letting them pull you down.
But Natalie tells detectives that Larice wouldn't back down.
As they leave, Larice has some choice words for Dathan, and Natalie believes that Larice actually did follow up on that threat.
She was like, mark your days. I bet you your boy's breathing his last breath.
You breathe your last breath.
Dathan Gray's friend, Natalie Wallace, has just told police that his estranged wife, Larice King, had threatened his life barely 15 minutes before Dathan was gunned down outside his Bridgeport, Connecticut apartment.
Back off. You breathe your last breath.
According to Natalie, Larice says to Dathan, you are going to breathe your last breath today.
Natalie said that Larice and her friend left shortly after making that threat. Then Natalie went down the road back to that party.
But according to Natalie, the drama wasn't over.
Really, Dathan? Why am I coming up here again for something with you and her?
Natalie says as Larice leaves, Dathan's girlfriend Crystal drives up, and that is when they got into an argument.
I didn't call Larice over here.
Him and her was arguing this husband. He kept saying, you won't defend me, you won't defend me. I love you to death, but you won't defend me when it comes to that group.
That's when Natalie noticed new trouble approaching.
As he's standing there, you see two guys walking down, they got hoodies on.
Something was wrong. She sensed it. It was July. It was too warm for them to have the hoodies.
Natalie says she actually tried to call out to Dathan to warn him.
But Dathan never heard the warning.
They walked up, they pushed the girlfriend out the way, they surrounded him. The first shot hit his head.
Natalie told detectives she immediately ran for cover.
That first gunshot went off, I took off. They didn't stop shooting, it sounded like the damn gun was empty.
According to Natalie, the shooters disappeared as quickly as they'd come.
They must have took off. When we came, we went straight to Day-Day. Nobody came past us. Okay. But they had to go the opposite way.
She said by the time she came back around the corner after the shooting had stopped, that is when she noticed that Dathan was just lying there.
They just walked right up to him and took his life for no reason.
Though she's not entirely sure who the shooters were, Natalie has no doubt who was behind it.
And she is convinced that Larice put them up to it.
She always threatened him.
Natalie described a very, very violent relationship. She said that Larice many a times had fought Dathan, jumped Dathan.
She always want to fight.
It's not only women that's abused, it's men as well. And my son was being abused. They were fighting him every day, and she was beating on him.
When someone is experiencing domestic violence, they usually are ashamed of what's going on, and they don't want their family and friends to know. But a lot of times they'll downplay it because they don't want the family to dislike the partner that is actually causing the pain.
But Dathan never called the police.
It's a big stigma that kind of weighs on the shoulder of domestic violence, and men don't feel like there might be enough resources for them out there. They don't feel comfortable coming forward, whatever the case might be.
Following Natalie's statement, detectives track down Larice and bring her in for questioning, accompanied by a family member.
When asked by the detectives about the incident with her and Dathan earlier that day, she doesn't deny it.
She said Dathan was always getting drunk and starting trouble.
Larice claimed that she only went to the snack shack that night because Dathan's boss had called her.
She was yelling and screaming on the phone. She was saying they did something. And I'm like, what? I couldn't really hear her because she was mad. So I was like, all right, I'm coming.
And not quite sure why the owner of the store called her to come, other than perhaps she thought she could calm him down.
Larice also admits that when she and her friend Jessica confronted Dathan outside the store, things got out of hand.
Get back in the car. My best friend says to him, like, you always disrespecting her. Like, she ain't even say nothing to you. So he spit, she spit back. That's when I just punched him in his face.
Why would you do something like that?
Why the hell is she in my
business? You want to hit me?
She actually admits that she was getting really, really tired of his behavior.
He called there saying that in the middle of this argument or this fight with Dathan, you said today you're going to take your last breath.
Those words never came out my mouth. Never.
When pressed by detectives, Larice denies having anything to do with the shooting.
Larice says she went home after the fight.
I have nothing in me, like, to do that. Like, this is somebody I love.
She swore she had no idea who did it.
I'm good. I'm good.
Did you have a beef with anyone?
I don't know.
After taking the statement from Larice, detectives bring in her friend Jessica to verify her story. Jessica confirms that she was with Larice the night of the shooting.
She said she got a call from Larice around 12 a.m. asking her to pick her up and give her a ride over to the East End.
She was calling me saying it was an emergency.
She said this is her best friend, so if she hears that this is an emergency, she comes running.
Jessica confirmed that Dathan had gotten into a fight with his boss, and then Larice was called.
She called Reese to straighten him out?
Yeah, like, cause she knows one, that Reese will cuss him out and beat him up. Two, that Dathan was drunk, and she know Reese don't got no problem putting him in his place.
Jessica claims that once they arrived at Dathan's, the situation quickly escalated.
I'm like, Reese, come on, we don't got time for this. And then him and her started fighting.
Jessica says she and Dathan's friend Natalie eventually got Dathan and Larice separated.
But it seemed to have actually started to calm down, and it just became more of a verbal altercation, more so than anything else.
But Jessica denies that Larice ever said anything about Dathan drawing his last breath.
You never heard Reese make those threats, right, on the phone? Like,
I heard him say,
you gonna do something to him? Or...
No, I didn't hear that. I heard her cussing him out.
According to Jessica, she and Larice left soon after.
After the fight, she drove Larice home.
But is Jessica telling detectives the truth? Or is she trying to cover for her friend?
The detectives still consider Larice highly suspicious.
What detectives needed was some way to connect her with the two shooters.
Detectives pull surveillance footage from other cameras in the area in the hopes they'll be able to track Larice's movements in the minutes surrounding the shooting.
Detectives paid special attention to the path that both Crystal and Natalie said the killers took after the shooting.
And sure enough, the surveillance camera shows that the two men fled the scene and ran around the corner to Beardsley Street and got into a white SUV.
And when detectives rewind the footage from that same camera to just minutes before the shooting, the revelations keep coming.
When the SUV pulled up on Beardsley Street prior to the shooting, the two men get out.
As the men leave, a woman exits the back seat of the car to get into the driver's seat.
She got in, left the car running, and switched off the headlights.
You hear the shots. They come back, jump in the car, they drive off.
But who is the mystery woman in the footage? Investigators have a strong hunch.
While the image was a little bit grainy, detectives had no doubt about the identity of the getaway driver.
That woman looks to be Larice King.
Detectives have uncovered surveillance footage that appears to show Larice King in an SUV with the two men who gunned down her estranged husband, Dathan Gray.
When she exited the vehicle to get into the front seat, they were able to see that this was her.
Based on the video, it appears that Larice was actually driving the getaway vehicle.
With this new bombshell evidence in tow, detectives bring Larice in for a second interview.
What's been happening the last couple of days?
Immediately, she starts complaining that Dathan friends have been threatening her on social media.
Everybody saying I had something to do with it, and I didn't.
The detectives immediately cut her off.
We've been looking through videos. It's hard to find out who's who.
They ask her, tell us what you were wearing that day.
Larice told them she was wearing black pants, a pink shirt, and a white scarf.
Is it like tied on your head? Okay.
This is exactly what the woman was wearing in the video.
We got a video. It looks like you getting into the back seat of a Ford Explorer. Take a drive.
I did.
Okay.
She then admits to the police that after Jessica dropped her off home, she did return back to the East End with some different friends.
But she insisted that going back really had nothing to do with Dathan.
She said the purpose to go back down there was to go to the party.
She said they went to the club, but it was extremely crowded, so they decided to go home.
When the shots went off, you were already...
Yeah, I'm already home.
You were already home?
They let her know that they actually do have her on video.
We got you on video. A minute and 30 seconds before they go on the shoot.
We do have the car going north on Newfield, and it turned onto Beardsley Street, and that's where you got out of the back seat and got the driver's seat.
It's on video, video don't lie. You could say whatever, but video's a video. And this is your opportunity right now.
Larice appears shocked by the revelation, and detectives try to use it to their advantage.
The police press her about the names of the men in the SUV.
We just want you to be honest with us.
Just tell us who's in the car, and we do the rest.
But Larice won't budge.
I just want to go ahead.
You just want to go here? Okay.
It looks very suspicious.
Despite Larice's refusal to cooperate, detectives still have one more card to play.
In some of the video, detectives were just able to make out the SUV's license plate. They discovered it was registered to a gentleman by the name of Corey Baldwin.
When detectives bring Corey in for an interview, he says he might have given Larice a ride that night.
However, he denied that he had anything to do with Dathan's murder.
You never asked her?
He said no one got out of his car to do anything to anybody.
But when detectives confronted him about what they knew, he ended the interview.
You know, we got statements. I'm just telling you.
Suspecting that Corey is one of the shooters, detectives hope Dathan's girlfriend, Crystal Blair, can pick him out of a photo lineup.
If they got a positive ID on Corey as one of the men in the hoodies, that could lead them to the other shooter.
Do you happen to recognize any of these gentlemen as the shooter?
But detectives are out of luck.
None of them look familiar at all. I couldn't really tell their hoods were pulled up.
Crystal was unable to identify anyone in that lineup as the shooter.
Sorry.
Still, detectives have what they need to press charges against Larice.
Having her exiting the vehicle, going into the front seat, turning off the headlights, waiting for them to return with the same hoodies that they left in, and then subsequently driving off. That is viable evidence. So she was charged with conspiracy to commit murder.
Will the threat of prison time finally be enough to break Larice's silence about the shooters? Unfortunately for investigators, she still refuses to play ball.
Larice refuses any feelers for a possible deal.
Larice refuses to give up any names.
Unwilling to cut a deal with the prosecutors, Larice goes on trial in May of 2021.
Larice was the first person to go on trial in Connecticut since the COVID-19 restrictions were put in place.
The restrictions make for an unusual scene in the courtroom.
The case is tried in front of a panel of 3 judges.
There was never a jury. I didn't even know what to expect. That was the hardest 7 days of my life.
Larice's attitude during the trial doesn't make things any easier.
She didn't care. I feel like she just like, I'm caught, whatever, and I'll deal with the punishment. She just sat there like, I'm here. Let's get on with it.
In their opening statement, prosecutors argue that although Larice didn't pull the trigger, she was the mastermind behind what happened to Dathan.
They said she orchestrated everything.
According to the prosecution, after the fight with Dathan, Larice decided to recruit a couple of friends to settle the score with him once and for all.
It was like putting a match to the flame and everything just exploded from there.
I'm tired of this mess. This is the last time he ever disrespects me.
They returned to the area, and while Larice waited in the getaway car, her friends went around the corner.
Once the men left the SUV, Larice got into the driver's seat.
She turned the headlights off and waited for them to return.
While Larice waited, the shooters rounded the corner and found Dathan in the middle of an argument with his new girlfriend, Crystal Blair.
They came towards him, pushed Crystal out the way, and then shot him 16 times. They didn't stop shooting until the gun was emptied.
After that, prosecutors say the shooters returned to the white SUV, and Larice drove them from the scene. But when it's the defense's turn, Larice's attorney argues that the prosecution has no proof Larice wanted Dathan dead.
The way that they said in court, they made it seem like he just was no good. Why do you even care about him? Because he's a lowlife anyway. Now that hurt my heart because while they might have thought he was nothing, he was all something to us.
The defense counters that this is all speculation and that Larice King actually had no idea what was going to happen to Dathan that night.
But the court doesn't buy it.
They found Larice King guilty and sentenced her to 50 years in prison.
In spite of Larice's conviction, Dathan's family finds little comfort in the outcome.
That wasn't a win to me. That wasn't a victory. That wasn't nothing remotely close.
She never expressed any remorse. She never apologized to the family.
And to this day, police have been unable to gather enough evidence to hold the men who fired the fatal shots accountable for their part in the crime.
The 2 shooters are still out there. They were never arrested.
Dathan's family can only hope that someday the police will make an arrest.
It's still an active investigation, and they're gathering evidence. But sometimes justice takes time.
We still not through it. My faith was shaken. I was one who's a prayer warrior, but I was so devastated.
I really lost a lot of hope. I lost a lot of everything. I'm still living, but I'm living like I'm dead.
I get all the time, oh, you have memories. Oh, just think about the good time. But I don't want to think about that. I want my son.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.